The Cowboys were flatlining. 3 wins, 13 losses, empty seats, a quarterback named Troy Aikman limping behind a broken offensive line, coaches yelling into the void, fans abandoning ship. The proudest brand in football was rotting in the Texas sun. Then everything exploded. An oil tycoon from Arkansas storms through the front office doors. He fires the most iconic coach in NFL history before his first day is over. Reporters laugh. Owners scoff. But he doesn't blink.
There is no substitute for winning. I know that's a cliche, but we must win. We will win. Win is the name of the game.
He's already calling the shots. Within months, the Cowboys burn their roster to the ground. Star players are traded, draft picks are hoarded like gold. The team becomes unrecognizable. Not worse, not better yet, just different. Like a beast mutating in a lab. Because beneath the surface, something is stirring. Suddenly, they win 11 games. Then a playoff berth. Then a statement. Then a massacre. And before the league can process it, Dallas is hoisting the Lombardi. Once, twice, 3 times in 4 years. But the price of domination is chaos. Because while the trophies piled up, so did the bodies. There were locker room fights, drug charges, off-the-field brawls. There was a mansion nicknamed the White House, where players partied so hard the league tried to shut it down. There were egos too big for one sideline, especially the 2 men who had built it all and couldn't stand to share it. One wanted credit, the other wanted control. Only one stayed, but the team kept winning. They signed the league's biggest star just to keep him away from the enemy. They rolled through legends, they broke dynasties, and they smiled through every headline that said they were too wild, too reckless, too broken to repeat. But they weren't trying to win clean. They were trying to conquer. This wasn't just a dynasty, it was a firestorm of arrogance, brilliance, and destruction. This is the real story behind the most explosive team the NFL has ever seen. This is the team America loves to hate. The Dallas Cowboys were born out of politics. In 1960, the league was under siege. The upstart AFL had planted a team in Dallas, and the NFL couldn't afford to lose the South. So, with almost no prep time, the league fast-tracked a new franchise into Texas. The Cowboys were so late to the party, they missed the college draft entirely. Their roster was filled through an expansion draft. Backup players, older veterans, names nobody else wanted. No star, no momentum, no shot. They played at the Cotton Bowl, sharing a city with a rival league and a fan base split down the middle. The result? A debut season that felt more like a rehearsal. 0 wins, 11 losses, 1 tie. It wasn't football. It was survival in shoulder pads.
Back in those days, everything was exciting, even losses, because we were starting, we were struggling, and every day was a new experience.
But standing on the sideline, under a pressed suit and a stiff fedora, was a man already decades ahead of the league. Tom Landry. A former Giants defensive coordinator and World War II bomber pilot, Landry didn't speak much. He wasn't emotional. He wasn't charismatic. But he had something far more dangerous. A blueprint. He introduced the 4-3 defense to professional football and later revolutionized it into what became known as the flex defense. A system built on controlling gaps, disrupting timing, and dictating tempo. But he didn't stop on defense. Landry was also one of the early pioneers of pre-snap motion, the shotgun formation, and complex blocking schemes that turned football into a game of geometry. He was running a think tank while the rest of the league was still throwing haymakers. By the mid-1960s, Dallas stopped bleeding, and then they started winning. Their first real turning point came in 1967, in a game so cold, so violent, and so unforgettable, it earned a name: The Ice Bowl. Minus 13 degrees Fahrenheit in Green Bay. Frostbite on faces. Breath clouds like smoke. In the final seconds, Bart Starr lunged into the end zone and sent Dallas home. Broken, frozen, devastated. But the Cowboys had proven something that day. They could go toe-to-toe with Vince Lombardi's Packers, and they weren't going away. What followed was a slow, unstoppable march to dominance. In 1970, they finally reached the Super Bowl. The next year, they won it. Super Bowl VI, dismantling the Dolphins 24-3. In Super Bowl XII, they captured another title, this time behind a defense that felt engineered in a lab.
You can't imagine how it feels because you never suffered with us like we've suffered.
Between 1970 and 1979, the Cowboys reached the Super Bowl 5 times and became a permanent fixture in January football. But their greatest victory might have come off the field. They became popular. NFL films turned them into Hollywood. Their uniforms looked clean on TV. Their players had nicknames: Captain America for Staubach, Too Tall Jones, Hollywood Henderson. In 1978, with the Cowboys playing nearly every week on national television, announcer Pat Summerall uttered a phrase that would stick forever.
America's team.
America's team.
America's team.
America's team. It wasn't a nickname. It was a marketing weapon, a myth with muscle behind it. But nothing lasts forever. Landry, now in his 60s, refused to evolve. His offense, once innovative, started to creak. His staff aged with him. The league was shifting. Faster receivers, flashier offenses, dynamic play callers. But the Cowboys still looked like a team from 1972. Methodical, disciplined, and now slow. In 1986, they dropped to 7-9. The next year, 7-8. And in 1988, everything unraveled. A 3-13 record, their worst ever. The fans knew it. The players felt it. Even Landry, who rarely showed emotion, looked hollow. The old magic was gone. Herschel Walker, the electric running back who'd arrived from the USFL, racked up Pro Bowl stats and dazzling runs. But none of it mattered. The team was losing badly, and worse, they were irrelevant. The Cotton Bowl was long gone. Texas Stadium, once thunderous, felt like a library. Empty seats, dead air, apathetic boos. The Cowboys weren't just bad, they were decaying. And then came the Whispers. A name from Arkansas. Not a coach, not a football man, an oil tycoon. A deal maker, a rule breaker. Someone with no attachment to tradition and no reverence for legacies. He didn't care about the fedora, or the 5 Super Bowl trips, or the image on the helmet. Jerry Jones didn't come to restore Dallas. He came to blow it up.
My mother and dad had moved with the rest of their siblings to California during World War II. My father wasn't in the service, but he worked in the aircraft plants out there.
Jerry Jones was not born into football. He was born into risk. Raised in Arkansas, he grew up with a father who sold groceries during the day and hustled deals by night. Jerry watched. He learned. He absorbed the art of leverage, of presentation, of confidence that bordered on delusion. At the University of Arkansas, he played offensive line for the Razorbacks, blocking for a quarterback, but his body was not built for the NFL. His brain, however, was built for empire. After graduation, he borrowed $1 million, unsecured, to buy a chain of pizza restaurants. He lost everything. Crashed, burned, learned. Then he struck oil, literally. Jones built his fortune wildcatting oil in Arkansas and Oklahoma. Where others saw dry land, he saw black gold. By the mid-1980s, he wasn't just rich. He was dangerous rich. The kind of rich that made phone calls no one expected. Because while Dallas was falling apart on the field, Jerry was circling it from above. In early 1989, he made a call to team owner Bum Bright. Bright was fed up. His team had gone 3-13. The brand was fading. Landry's shine was gone, and the NFL, as a business, was only just beginning to explode. Jerry offered to buy the entire franchise, stadium and all, for $140 million. He didn't ask permission. He didn't seek approval. He closed. The ink wasn't even dry when he detonated the bomb. Tom Landry, the face of the franchise for 29 years, was fired. Not at a press conference, not with a retirement parade, on the spot.
The point is that it did mean everything to me for Coach Landry to hear what I had to say in the manner I had to say it as quickly as possible.
In the middle of a golf course in Austin, Texas, Landry was blindsided. The media was appalled. Longtime fans were livid. But Jerry Jones didn't flinch. He wasn't here to preserve history. He was here to bury it. Because to Jerry, tradition was a liability. He replaced Landry with Jimmy Johnson, a once teammate at the University of Arkansas, now a brash, blonde-haired coach who had just turned the University of Miami into a football militia. It wasn't just a hire. It was a signal. This was no longer Landry's team. This was Jerry's. Everything changed. He reshaped the front office, demanded control over business operations, inserted himself into personnel meetings, rewired the stadium's revenue system. Jerry didn't just want to win on the field. He wanted to own every inch of the operation. Every ad, every ticket, every trade, every storyline. He was loud, flashy, polarizing. Other owners rolled their eyes. TV networks didn't know what to make of him. But inside Dallas, something was shifting. The silence of the Landry years had been replaced by a roaring engine. Things were moving. Deals were happening. Draft picks were being stockpiled. Traditions were being scrapped and replaced with vision. Because Jerry didn't just want to win games. He wanted to build the American football empire. And to build that empire, he would need to fire. Chaos, boldness, and the perfect mad scientist to run the lab. Jimmy Johnson was waiting.
Give it your all. Play Hurricane football. There's only one way we know how to play the game.
4 quarters of football, anything can happen.
You don't ever stop until the end of the ball game.
Jimmy Johnson was born with a chip on his shoulder and a hurricane in his blood. Raised in Port Arthur, Texas, a refinery town that smelled like sweat and gasoline, he wasn't born into privilege or pedigree. He was small for a football player, but he hit like a man twice his size and talked like he already knew the ending. At Thomas Jefferson High, he played both ways. Defense was where he lived. Loud, fast, fearless. Everything he'd become as a coach, he already was as a teenager, just smaller. He played college ball at the University of Arkansas, where he earned a scholarship and started defensive lineman. He shared a locker room with Jerry Jones. Johnson was the brain of the defense. Jones protected the quarterback. Johnson wasn't good enough for the pros, but his mind was. After graduating in 1965, he began coaching, first as an assistant at Louisiana Tech, then to Picayune High School in Mississippi. He studied schemes like religion, became obsessed with the game's hidden geometry, leverage, pursuit, angles, overcommitments. While others coached effort, Jimmy coached pressure, relentless, suffocating pressure. He moved up the ranks, Oklahoma State, Iowa State, Wichita State. In the early 70s, he joined the University of Oklahoma under Chuck Fairbanks, then returned to Arkansas. But it wasn't until 1977 that he truly started building his coaching identity, when he landed at the University of Pittsburgh as defensive coordinator, working under Johnny Majors, alongside a young running back named Tony Dorsett. There, he learned how to weaponize speed. His defenses attacked, his linemen hunted. It was violence disguised as strategy. After a few more stops, he got his first head coaching job at Oklahoma State in 1979. The Cowboys were a disaster. Recruiting was nearly impossible. They had no pipeline, no swagger, no reason to believe. But Jimmy didn't need stars. He needed soldiers. His teams didn't win championships, but they got better every year. In 5 seasons, he took Oklahoma State from a 3-8 record to 8-4 and a national top 20 ranking. His reward? A call from Miami. It was 1984. The Hurricanes had just won a national title. Head coach Howard Schellenberger left for the USFL. Miami needed someone bold, someone ruthless enough to keep the program cocky and feared. Jimmy fit the mold and sharpened it. He turned Miami into a machine, a villain, a dynasty. His teams didn't just beat opponents, they embarrassed them. He built defenses like prisons and offenses like street fights. In 1986, they went 11-1. In 1987, they went undefeated and won the national championship. By the end of his 5th season, Johnson's record at Miami was 52-9. But the numbers only told part of the story. He was a national figure, slick-haired, fast-talking, unapologetic, loved by players, hated by rivals. The media called his teams arrogant. He didn't care. He wanted domination, not dignity. His teams partied, swaggered, and backed it up on Saturday. Behind the scenes, he was meticulous, a master of matchups, schemes, and mental warfare. He pushed players hard, but made them believe they were invincible. And Jerry Jones had been watching. Not just the wins, not just the stats, the transformation. Because Jimmy didn't walk into talent, he created it. He didn't ride tradition, he redefined it. He didn't just take programs to the next level, he built the next level. So in 1989, when Jones bought the crumbling Dallas Cowboys and needed someone not just to coach, but to tear it all down and start over, there was only one man in the world who made sense. Jimmy Johnson was never the safe choice. He was the necessary one.
This was not done to hurt anybody. It was not done out of disrespect to anyone. All I know is I have a burning desire to be the very best.
Jimmy Johnson didn't walk into a locker room. He walked into a funeral. The Cowboys weren't rebuilding. They were rotting. Aging veterans clung to past glory. Practice reps felt optional. The tape room was silent. The weight room was empty, and the scoreboard was a weekly crime scene. Jimmy watched film like a surgeon reading x-rays, not to diagnose, but to amputate. And then he started cutting. In 2 years, he gutted nearly the entire roster. 80 players in, 70 gone. If you were slow, you were out. If you couldn't be coached, you were gone. If you showed up late, pack your bags. Loyalty meant nothing. Sentiment was poison. He didn't care about resumes. He cared about reactions. Could you hit? Could you run? Could you take a punch and ask for more? Because that's what the future would require. But even Jimmy knew he couldn't draft his way out of the graveyard he inherited. He needed ammo, picks, leverage, something to flip. So he put the one shiny piece he had on the table, Herschel Walker. Walker was the only thing Dallas had left, a Pro Bowl running back, marketable, dangerous, loved, and Jimmy used him like bait. He dangled him in front of the Minnesota Vikings like a carrot dipped in gold, and Minnesota bit. The trade that followed didn't just shake the league, it rewrote it. 5 players, 8 draft picks, 3 first-rounders, 3 seconds, conditionals, swaps, hidden clauses. It wasn't a trade, it was a highway robbery with a handshake. Jimmy didn't even want the players. He knew he'd cut most of them. What he wanted was the future, and suddenly he owned it. From that avalanche of picks came Russell Maryland, Kevin Smith, Darren Woodson, Emmitt Smith, cornerstones, wrecking balls, names that would one day hoist Lombardis. Not immediately, but soon. 1989 was a bloodbath. 1 win, 15 losses. Troy Aikman got beaten like a drum every Sunday. He'd been drafted number 1 overall, the golden boy from UCLA. Strong arm, stoic presence. But Jimmy knew him long before the draft. He tried to recruit Aikman out of high school, tried again after he transferred from Oklahoma. Failed both times. But fate had a different playbook. Now they were stuck in the fire together. And Aikman wasn't the only ember. Jimmy had another flame already in the room. Wide receiver Michael Irvin. Flashy, loud, brash. Irvin wasn't just confident, he was a living soundbite. Jimmy had coached him at Miami, turned him into a deep threat with teeth. Now he was rehabbing from a knee injury, watching losses pile up from the sideline, but he didn't sulk. He roared. Irvin was the beating heart of the rebuild. When no one else believed, he shouted. When the locker room sagged, he screamed. He partied hard, practiced harder, and played like the game owed him money. 1990 brought flashes. Emmitt Smith arrived, undersized, overlooked, and flat out unstoppable. Teams questioned his speed. Jimmy didn't. He saw vision, balance, fire. Emmitt hit the hole like he was insulted it was empty. By midseason, he was dragging defenders for first downs, shifting the entire identity of the offense. The defense began to bite too. New draftees. Young, fast, violent. They didn't care about Pro Bowls. They wanted contact, wanted chaos. Games started getting close. A few even swung their way. 7-9. Still a losing record, but no one cared. The air was shifting. 1991 was the ignition. 11 wins, a playoff berth, a statement, a warning. Aikman found rhythm. Emmitt hit 1,500 yards. Irvin, 93 catches, nearly 1,600 yards, a league best. The offense was surgical. The defense, relentless. A gang of 24-year-olds with bad intentions. The Herschel Walker picks were now living, breathing nightmares for opposing quarterbacks. And Jimmy was the coordinator. Headset on, eyes narrowed, pacing like a caged animal waiting to strike. The Cowboys hadn't just recovered, they'd transformed. From slow to fast, from bloated to built, from sentimental to savage. Every inch of the old empire had been torn down and replaced, not with tradition, but with weapons. By the end of '91, the league could feel the tremor coming. They didn't know how big or how violent, but something in Dallas was rising, something dangerous, and it was only getting started.
Mind control the body, not the body controlling the mind. Right, Emmitt? That's it.
Training camp hit like a thunderclap. Intense, unforgiving, and soaked in expectation. Jimmy Johnson didn't believe in easing into greatness. Every rep was a test. Every mistake, a warning. Every player on trial.
It didn't matter who you were. He was going to ride you pretty hard.
The changes weren't cosmetic. They were structural. The Cowboys traded for Charles Haley, a two-time Super Bowl champion and defensive end from the 49ers, who arrived in Dallas angry. San Francisco had called him volatile. Dallas called him perfect. Haley was 6'5" fury in pads. His presence alone changed everything. Not just the edge rush, but the culture. He yelled, he pushed, he fought. But more than anything, he produced. The moment he walked into the locker room, Dallas got meaner. The draft brought more firepower. 2 first-round picks, Kevin Smith and Robert Jones, joined a defense already sharpening its teeth. Darren Woodson came in the second round, a future Hall of Famer who hit like he was punishing history. The draft class was deep. Clayton Holmes, Jimmy Smith, even a backup lineman named James Brown. All hungry, all violent. Jimmy didn't want projects. He wanted pressure. Cuts followed. So did noise. But inside Valley Ranch, the tone had changed. The defense was snarling. The locker room buzzed with youth and war cries. Fresh from intensive off-season training and rehab, Emmitt Smith and Michael Irvin flashed in camp reps. Aikman's passes snapped out of his hand like they were late for something. Week 1 against Washington was the warning shot. The defending champs got thumped. Dallas outran, out-hit, and out-schemed them. Irvin danced through coverage. Emmitt cut like gravity works differently on him. It wasn't just a win. It was a statement. This isn't 1991 anymore. The season kept rolling. Giants, Cardinals, Raiders, all fell. By mid-season, the Cowboys were 6-1. The only blemish came against the Eagles, a brutal, rain-soaked loss in Philly. But even then, the defense flashed. Haley collapsed pockets. Ken Norton Jr. flew sideline to sideline. Woodson began punishing receivers for daring to cross the middle. They finished 13-3. Aikman threw for over 3,400 yards with 23 touchdowns. Emmitt Smith led the league in rushing. Irvin, 1,396 yards, 7 touchdowns, and a catch in every big moment that mattered. The offensive line, Williams, Newton, Stepnoski, turned into a wall of violence. The defense ranks top 5 in nearly every category. They had speed. They had schemes. They had swagger. 6 Cowboys were named to the Pro Bowl. Emmitt Smith, Jay Novacek, Mark Stepnoski, Nate Newton, Michael Irvin, and Troy Aikman. The band was getting recognition, but they didn't care. The mission wasn't January invites, it was February trophies. Wildcard weekend? Bye. Divisional round, the Philadelphia Eagles. The same team that stomped them earlier that year, but this time in Texas Stadium, the script flipped. Aikman threw for 200 yards and a pair of touchdowns. Emmitt ran angry. The defense swallowed Randall Cunningham whole. Final score, 34-10.
Super job!
Not a game.
You are one game away from the Super Bowl.
A reckoning. Then came the mountain, San Francisco. The 49ers were the NFL's blueprint. Montana had passed the crown to Young. Jerry Rice was still torching secondaries. Ricky Watters was a blur. George Seifert's team had finished 14-2, the league's best. They were fast, smart, and polished. A dynasty still standing, and they were playing at home. Candlestick Park. Rain hit in waves. Not heavy, but slick enough to matter. The ball felt greasy. The field felt slow. But the Cowboys didn't flinch. The storm rolled in quiet. Just a nudge from Lynn Elliott's toe. A 20-yard field goal. But that whisper didn't last. Steve Young did a quarterback sneak, dragging the ball across the plane. Touchdown 49ers. In the second quarter, Dallas was on the 5-yard line. Emmitt Smith saw daylight and ran with it without being touched. Touchdown. 10-7 Cowboys. But the air was shifting. Dallas was no longer reacting. They were dictating. And then, in the fourth quarter, the dam broke. Aikman dropped back and floated a ball to Emmitt out in the flat. It was a simple play, but Smith made it personal. He turned upfield and ran like the football had a vendetta. 16 yards later, he was in the end zone, flexing every doubt out of his body. 24-13. The 49ers punched back. Young hit Jerry Rice on a dart inside the 5, and the legend did what legends do. He finished it. 2 snaps later, Kelvin Martin finished the job with a 6-yard touchdown catch. 30-20. Final. Dallas had slayed the Giants. In the locker room, players wept. Others screamed. Irvin bounced like a man on fire. Emmitt smiled like the kid nobody believed in. Aikman just sat, calm, knowing. Jimmy didn't speak. Not yet, because Dallas wasn't done. They were headed to Pasadena for the Super Bowl. Their first since the 70s. The first for this new tribe of chaos and talent. The 49ers were the past. The Cowboys? They were tomorrow. Jimmy Johnson got the team's attention in the locker room. He paused, grinned, and let the line fly. 4 words that detonated across the country.
How about them Cowboys? Yeah!
The fact that we beat the great 49ers with Jerry Rice and Steve Young, we beat that team. Who were the Buffalo Bills? You know, we beat the 49ers.
Those 100,000 people, and they were right here.
Wave of emotion and really what this game was all about and how different it was.
The sun in Pasadena burned like it had something to prove. January 31st, 1993. Rose Bowl, a place that felt more like a cathedral than a stadium. 98,000 fans, 1 million camera flashes, and 2 teams who couldn't have been more different. One side, Buffalo, polished, experienced, back in the Super Bowl for the 3rd straight year, but also carrying something heavier than pads. Failure. They had lost the last 2, and another loss? That wasn't just pressure. That was history waiting to bury them. On the other side, Dallas. Explosive, violent, young. and hungry in a way that couldn't be coached. 2 years ago, they were football hell. Now they were standing on the doorstep of a coronation, not just to win, but to take. Garth Brooks sang the national anthem. Michael Jackson waited backstage to perform at halftime. But the main act was already warming up in the tunnel. Pads clashing, helmets shaking, Aikman pacing like a machine loading its chamber. The game started fast. Too fast for Buffalo. First quarter, Buffalo struck first. Thurman Thomas scored. Brief celebration. But the Cowboys didn't blink. Not even a little. Because they'd been through the fire. They bled through rebuilds. They trained like inmates. Now they were free. Aikman hit Novacek. Touchdown. Then Emmitt got rolling. Then Irvin caught one. And another. By halftime, it was 28-10. Michael Jackson moonwalked, but Dallas had already stolen the show. Because the second half wasn't a contest. It was a demolition. Aikman was flawless. 4 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Every drop back looked scripted by fate. Emmitt? He danced and bruised and drove the Bills' defense into therapy. Irvin caught fire, hauling in 2 scores in less than 90 seconds of game time. The offensive line? Williams, Newton, Stebnoski buried the Bills in turf. But it wasn't just the offense. Dallas's defense stripped the soul from Buffalo. Charles Haley chased Jim Kelly like he owed him money. And then the strangest play of the night. Defensive lineman Leon Lett scooped it up. Big man, bigger dreams. He took off, sprinting down the sideline like he was chasing a fairy tale. But then, Don Beebe, a wide receiver, half Lett's size, out of the frame, suddenly sprinting back into history. Beebe dove, knocked the ball loose at the 1-yard line. No touchdown, just a fumble rolling out of the end zone. It didn't matter to the score, but it mattered to the moment. Because even in humiliation, Buffalo had heart. And even in dominance, Dallas showed cracks of immaturity. But still, this was a coronation. Final score, 52-17. The Cowboys didn't just win the Super Bowl. They erased the past and rewrote the future. Troy Aikman stood under confetti. Emmitt wore the smile of a man who'd just outrun every doubt. Irvin screamed into cameras, into microphones, into the world. Jimmy stood back, arms folded, hair perfect, mission complete. 2 years ago, this team had been trash. Now, they were champions. Not by luck, but by blood, calculation, and violence. And somewhere beneath the madness, Jerry Jones smiled, because his empire had just begun. They were champions, but peace never landed in Dallas, because before the parade even ended, a storm was already forming. It started with money. Emmitt Smith, the league's leading rusher, the engine of the offense, the soul of the locker room, wanted a raise, deserved a raise, but Jerry Jones didn't budge. He had built a business empire by squeezing margins, not surrendering to them. He wasn't about to start with a running back, so Smith held out. No practices, no training camp, no week 1. And Dallas? They looked lost without him. Week 1, a home opener against Washington. The air was thick with confetti residue and unfinished expectations, but the offense was stuck in mud. The defense didn't show up, but barely. Dallas lost 35-16. Week 2, Buffalo, a rematch of the Super Bowl. Same opponent, same uniforms, different result. Aikman threw 2 picks. The run game barely existed. The Bills won 13-10 in Dallas. The crowd booed. Reporters circled. The locker room pulsed with tension. The champions were drowning. And Emmitt, still on the couch. Players started whispering. Coaches snapped. Even Jimmy Johnson, usually ice cold, looked ready to explode. Because everyone knew the truth. They needed number 22. Finally, Emmitt backed off some commands. Jerry gave in a little, and an agreement was reached. The holdout ended. Emmitt returned, and on a steamy afternoon in Week 3 against the Phoenix Cardinals, the Cowboys got their heartbeat back. He didn't dominate, not yet, but the weight lifted. The run game reappeared. The line looked sharper. Dallas won. Then they won again. And again. 7 straight victories, each one louder than the last. Emmitt wasn't just back, he was reborn. He cut harder, finished runs angrier, like he was proving a point with every carry. By midseason, he was slicing defenses like a surgeon with a grudge. The line in front of him, still violent, still perfect. Newton, Williams, Stebnoski, like moving granite walls, they created daylight where there was none. Aikman, precise. Irvin, ferocious. Novacek, silent but lethal. And now, with Emmitt back, the Cowboys were operating with nuclear rhythm. But it wasn't just wins, it was war. Week 7, at Philadelphia, a blood feud. The field felt cursed. Bodies flew. Fights broke out. But Dallas didn't blink. 23-10. Statement. Week 8, Giants. Another street fight. Emmitt cracked 100 yards. Jimmy screamed himself hoarse on the sideline. 31-9. Dominance. The streak kept going, but so did the bruises. Aikman took hits that rattled helmets off heads. Irvin limped through ankle pain. Emmitt played through bruises. But they didn't stop. Because by now, the mission wasn't just to win. It was to survive. They entered the final week of the regular season with a record of 11-4. Same record as the Giants. Same division. 1 game left. Cowboys versus Giants. Winner takes the NFC East. Loser? Wild card. It didn't feel like week 18. It felt like war. And in the middle of it, with everything on the line, Emmitt Smith's shoulder popped out of its socket. He could have walked off. No one would have blamed him. But he stayed in. And what followed was the most iconic game of his life. Play after play, he ran. Not just through defenders, but through pain. He tucked his left arm to his chest and used only his right to stiff arm, to shield, to balance. And still, 168 yards. 40 of them in overtime. Dallas won. They locked up the division, the number 1 seed. A bye week, rest, recovery. But the scars were showing. Troy Aikman's back was sore. Irvin's ankle barely held. The defense was limping. Jimmy's voice had gone hoarse for good. And behind the scenes, small rumbles of tension started. Jerry wanted credit for the team's success. Jimmy wanted space to work his magic. The smiles were tight, the handshakes forced. It was working, but only just. Playoffs. First up, the Green Bay Packers. Brett Favre. Wild, talented, and dangerous, but not ready. Dallas didn't flinch. Emmitt ran wild. Irvin torched man coverage. The defense rattled Favre's cage until he looked human again. 27-17. No drama. Then came the real test. San Francisco. Again. Same 2 teams, same stakes, a year later. But now the 49ers were sharper, stronger. The defense was top tier, and the revenge tour was coming. Aikman took a hit to the head. Gone. Bernie Kosar stepped in. The old veteran. Slow feet, slow delivery, but calm. And Emmitt, still there. Shoulder taped, still running like it didn't matter. Dallas took the lead, then stretched it. And in the fourth quarter, Kosar found Alvin Harper on a crucial 3rd down. A whip route. First down. Game over. San Francisco folded again. Final, 38-21. Another trip to the Super Bowl. But as the confetti rained, something was different. The celebrations were more mild than before. Not a lot of champagne eruptions. Just exhale. Because this team wasn't chasing glory anymore. They were trying to outrun exhaustion.
If you're going to talk the talk, you got to walk the walk.
Dallas Cowboys are going to win it all, walk the walk, talk the talk, you know it.
The Cowboys were back, but this time it felt different. Atlanta, January 30th, 1994. Super Bowl XXVIII. Same opponent as last year, the Buffalo Bills. Same stakes, different weight. Because now Dallas wasn't just chasing greatness, they were defending it. And beneath the helmets and camera lights, a silent fracture was forming. One that couldn't be taped up or coached around. Kickoff was loud. The Georgia Dome vibrated. Natalie Cole's voice echoed through the rafters, smooth and haunting. The world was watching. But inside the Cowboys locker room, the silence between two men could swallow a stadium. Jimmy Johnson and Jerry Jones. The architect and the owner weren't speaking. Not shouting, not whispering. Just silence. Cold, sharp, deliberate. And it spread like frost over steel. On the field, the game started slow. Not with fireworks, but with warning flares. Dallas struck first. Eddie Murray split the uprights from 41 yards. Then Buffalo responded, boot for boot. A 54-yard bomb from Steve Christie knotted it at 3-3. So far, no knockdowns, just jabs. In the second quarter, Murray again, 24 yards. Dallas 6-3. But Buffalo wasn't backing down. Thurman Thomas finally broke through. 4 yards and a touchdown. 10-6 Bills. Then came another field goal. 13-6. And just like that, halftime. The defending champs were trailing. But inside the locker room, there was no panic. No yelling. Jimmy Johnson didn't need volume to command the room. He spoke clearly, calmly. A surgeon giving instructions before the cut. No slogans, no speeches, just precision. Then came the flip. Opening the third, Buffalo blinked, and Dallas pounced. Thurman Thomas, the heartbeat of the Bills, fumbled. James Washington scooped it up and sprinted 48 yards the other way. Touchdown. Tie game. And suddenly, the air shifted. Momentum had a new owner. From there, it was Emmitt time. Third quarter, 15-yard rush. Touchdown, 2013. The Cowboys sideline erupted. Helmets slapped. Fists flew into the air. Emmitt wasn't just running. He was demoralizing. In the fourth, he came back for more. 1 yard. Another touchdown. Another punch to Buffalo's gut. 27-13. And to finish them off, one last kick from Murray. Final 30-13. Cowboys. Again. Back-to-back Super Bowl champions. The confetti fell. The MVP trophy, Emmitt's this time, gleamed in the lights. He stood on the podium, not dancing or shouting, just nodding, like all of this was inevitable. Because for him, it probably was. Aikman was calm. Irvin grinned like he'd stolen something. Jimmy, hands on hips, hair still perfect, but there was no bear hug with Jerry. No joint champagne spray. Just a cold distance between the two most powerful men in football. They'd done it. Again. Back-to-back titles. A modern dynasty. But it didn't feel like a beginning. It felt like a countdown. Because this empire wasn't built to last. It was built to burn. The champagne hadn't dried, but in Dallas, the glow of victory was already casting shadows. The moment they went back-to-back, it didn't feel like a celebration. It felt like a standoff. Because now, Jerry wanted more. Not trophies, not tickets. He wanted credit. He'd built this. He'd taken the risk, fired the legend, bought the franchise, hired the coach, funded the fire. And as the camera zoomed in on Jimmy Johnson, and as the headlines gushed over the architect of a dynasty, Jerry saw his reflection disappearing. Jimmy saw it too, and he didn't flinch. He wasn't a politician. He was a general, built to lead, not share. His authority was absolute. His methods worked. He drafted the roster. He set the tone. He scared the veterans and raised the kids. Jerry could handle the sweets. Jimmy handled the war. There were times during the 1993 season where Jerry started showing up to practices more, holding court with the media, slipping into personnel meetings. After the Super Bowl, during the NFL owners' meeting in Florida, in a fit of frustration, Jerry said the unthinkable out loud.
500 coaches could coach his team to a Super Bowl. And I said, hey, it's not going to work.
There are 500 coaches who could win with this team. The words landed like a punch in the throat.
I was devastated.
Yeah, I'm disappointed.
Players heard it. Reporters printed it. Jimmy remembered it. He had built a machine, but now the man funding it wanted the keys, and Jimmy wasn't about to ride shotgun. So at the height of glory, 2 titles, a dynasty in motion, the architect walked. No retirement tour, no farewell parade.
We have mutually decided that I would no longer be the head football coach with the Dallas Cowboys.
And in his place came a shadow, Barry Switzer. The former Oklahoma coaching legend, Jimmy's old college rival, charismatic, loud, but out of the game for years. No pro experience, no grind through the ranks, just a friend of Jerry's plucked from the past and dropped into a throne he hadn't earned. The reaction was disbelief. The man who built the fire was gone, and in his place stood someone holding a matchbook, unsure whether to light it or not. Training camp 1994 was strange. The roster was mostly intact. The bones were still strong, but the soul felt different. Practices were looser. The edges dulled. Barry cracked jokes. The team laughed. But behind the scenes, some players wondered if the hammer would ever fall again. The season opened with a win, then another. The Cowboys roared to a 9-2 start. Talent still wins, but the storm was brewing. Charles Haley, the emotional powder keg on defense, started exploding. At one point, he launched a helmet through a locker room wall. Another time, he threatened a coach. He missed meetings, fined, suspended, returned, then erupted again. Why? Because under Jimmy, there were rules. Under Barry, there were vibes. Players started noticing. The line between discipline and dysfunction blurred. Wins still came, but sloppier. Penalties surged. Fights broke out, not just in games, but in walkthroughs. There was a moment in December when the team held a players-only meeting, not for inspiration, but for order. The playoffs arrived anyway. First up, the Packers. Favre came swinging, but Dallas controlled the tempo. Emmitt ran wild. Irvin broke coverage. They won 35-9. Easy. Then came San Francisco, the NFC Championship. But this wasn't the 1992 or 1993 49ers. This was the reloaded version. Steve Young had finally stepped into Montana's shoes. Deion Sanders, the league's most feared corner, now wore red and gold. They were hungry, they were violent, and they were done being Dallas's little brother. The game was a gut punch. 10 points, that's all, but it wasn't close. The dynasty had been stopped. As the confetti fell in Candlestick, Steve Young screamed into the sky like a curse had been lifted. And in the Dallas locker room, silence. Not from pain, but confusion. They still had the talent, the weapons, the experience, but the spine was gone. Jimmy wasn't there, and for the first time in years, it showed. Some said it was the end, but the Cowboys weren't done yet. Not quite. The Cowboys were still dangerous, but they weren't the same. They were now a team without a voice.
Let's go, let's go!
Without Jimmy, without the fear that used to live in every meeting room and sideline. Barry Switzer had inherited a Ferrari, but he was driving it like a golf cart.
It's not hard to be a football coach. Let me go do what I want to do.
Switzer cracked jokes at practice, wore boots on the sideline, let players go unchecked. He called it trust, but veterans knew better. This wasn't freedom, it was erosion. There were fewer team meetings, looser curfews, less accountability. Players partied more, practiced less, and yet they kept winning. Not because of structure, because of muscle memory, because of talent, and because of timing. Week 2 of the 1995 season,
I don't care what it says. You get me, Deion.
Deion Sanders signed with the Dallas Cowboys.
Are you ready? I was born ready.
It wasn't a surprise. It was a power play. Jerry Jones had lost him to San Francisco the year before and watched him help the 49ers take the NFC crown. Now, Jerry made sure that never happened again. 7 years, $35 million, more than any corner had ever seen. But Dion wasn't ready to play, not yet. He'd had an ankle injury in the offseason. Rehab came first. The Cowboys were loading. By the time Dion hit the field in Week 9, Dallas was already 6-1. The roster was humming on raw talent alone. Emmitt Smith was running like he wanted to bury history, already stacking touchdowns like poker chips. Irvin was unguardable again, with 1,600 yards waiting in his hands. Troy Aikman was barely making mistakes. The offensive line looked like it was built in a steel mill. The defense? Still mean, still fast, still violent. Then came Dion, the best corner in football, a returner so electric he made punters pray. The moment he suited up, the field shrank. Quarterbacks stopped throwing right. Receivers started looking nervous, and in special teams meetings, coaches started skipping his name because they didn't want to tempt fate. This was prime time, and even in limited games, he changed the math. They finished 12-4, first in the NFC East, top 5 offense, top 10 defense, 6 Pro Bowlers. Emmitt set a career high with 25 rushing touchdowns, most in the league. He broke the Cowboys' single-season rushing record with 1,773 yards. Irvin finished second in the NFL in receiving. It didn't look like dominance. It looked like inevitability. But inside the walls, it felt like a fire with no hose. Still, the playoffs didn't care. Divisional round, Philadelphia. The Cowboys didn't just win. They suffocated. The defense made Randall Cunningham look like a practice squad call-up. Final score, 30-11. No drama, just violence. Then came Green Bay, the NFC Championship. Brett Favre was no longer a wild card. He was polished now, dangerous. Reggie White, Sean Jones, and a stacked Packers defense stood waiting. Lambeau believed, but they weren't in Lambeau. They were in Texas Stadium, and Dallas wasn't losing this game. Emmitt carried the ball 35 times, didn't flinch once, 150 yards, 3 touchdowns. He ran like the weight of the franchise sat on his shoulders, and it probably did. Irvin cut through double coverage like it wasn't there. Aikman never blinked. And Dion, he locked down the field. Not with picks, with shadows. Favre stopped looking that way. That's how primetime played defense, by deleting half the field from the playbook. Green Bay kept it close, too close. But in the fourth quarter, when the Cowboys needed the dagger, they gave it to Emmitt. He drove it in. Final score, 38-27. The Cowboys were going back to the Super Bowl for the 3rd time in 4 years. No one could quite explain how, not honestly, because it wasn't coaching. It wasn't discipline, it wasn't structure. It was momentum, madness, and a barely controlled fire. It was a team built on stars, not strategy, fueled by chaos, not command. They weren't winning with clarity. They were winning in spite of it. And somehow, it worked. January 28, 1996, Tempe, Arizona, Sun Devil Stadium. The anthem rolled through the desert air. Vanessa Williams, poised and powerful. Diana Ross prepared to parachute out of the halftime show. But for the Cowboys, the stakes were more grounded. Their 3rd Super Bowl in 4 years, but for the first time without Jimmy Johnson. Across from them, Pittsburgh. Brutal, relentless, built on defense. Blitzburgh, the number 1 unit in the NFL. Greg Lloyd, Kevin Green, Carnell Lake. They didn't bend, they broke you. The Cowboys were more talented, but less disciplined. And under Barry Switzer, no one was quite sure who was steering the ship. The opening quarter began with control. Chris Boniel drilled a 42-yard field goal, 3-0. Then Troy Aikman led a clean, methodical drive. He zipped a strike to Jay Novacek across the goal line. Touchdown. 10-0 Dallas. In the second quarter, the Cowboys added more. Another Boniel field goal, this one from 35 yards. 13-0. They were in command until they weren't. Late in the half, Neil O'Donnell led the Steelers down the field. With 13 seconds left, he found Yancey Thigpen for a 6-yard touchdown. 13-7 at halftime. Third quarter. That's when the game twisted. O'Donnell dropped back, looked right, fired. Straight into Larry Brown's arms. The quiet cornerback made the biggest play of his life. 44 yards on the return, setting up Dallas in scoring position. One play later, Emmitt Smith, 1 yard, touchdown, 20-7. But Pittsburgh kept swinging. They added a field goal early in the fourth, 46 yards from Norm Johnson. Then they shocked the Cowboys with a successful onside kick. O'Donnell hit a few passes. Bam Morris punched in a touchdown. 2017. Game on. The Cowboys weren't crumbling, but the pressure was real. Then, lightning struck again. O'Donnell dropped back, misread, fired. Larry Brown, again. Another interception, another back-breaking mistake. 33 yards on the return. Dallas took over in scoring position. Aikman handed it off. 3 plays later, Emmitt slammed it in from 4 yards out. 27-17. That was it. O'Donnell unraveled. The Steelers never recovered. The Cowboys ran the clock down. No drama, no miracles. Just a final whistle and another championship. 3 Super Bowls in 4 years. Barry Switzer was lifted on shoulders, holding a trophy he hadn't built. Larry Brown, the soft-spoken corner, was named Super Bowl MVP. Emmitt Smith finished with 49 yards, but 2 touchdowns, and the steady drumbeat of greatness. Aikman walked off without words. Irvin hugged teammates. No sideline sprint, no wild celebration, just a trophy and a quiet knowing this was the end of something. A 3rd ring, but it didn't feel the same. Not without Jimmy. The dynasty didn't die when the win stopped. It was dying while they were still winning. Even in 1992, as the Cowboys stormed towards their first Super Bowl under Jimmy Johnson,
How about them Cowboys?
the cracks were already forming. Michael Irvin was unstoppable on Sundays and unpredictable the rest of the week. He was the emotional engine of the team, but off the field, he drifted into something darker. The headlines followed. The whispers got louder, but the production never dropped, so nobody pulled the brakes. By 1994, their chaos had an address. A mansion near the team's practice facility. No team meetings, no curfews, no structure. Just women, drugs, guns, and a rule. No wives allowed. The players called it the White House, and everyone in the building knew about it. Coaches, staff, reporters, even NFL security tried to intervene. Nothing changed, because the Cowboys kept winning. Barry Switzer replaced Jimmy Johnson in 1994, and with him came fewer rules and more latitude. Curfews faded, practices loosened. Charles Haley was launching helmets through walls. Fights broke out on planes, in locker rooms, in practice. It wasn't order, it was inertia, and somehow it still worked. In 1995, they won their 3rd Super Bowl in 4 years, but less than 2 months later, the illusion shattered. March 4th, 1996, police raided a hotel room in Irving, Texas. Inside was Michael Irvin, shirtless, surrounded by cocaine, marijuana, and 2 topless dancers. He was arrested on the spot. It wasn't rumor, it wasn't hidden, it was front-page news. Irvin pleaded no contest. He got probation, a fine, community service, and a 5-game suspension. But even that couldn't derail the machine. The Cowboys were already too powerful, too profitable, too worshipped to break. Until they did. Deion Sanders, the NFL's ultimate weapon, played his final season in Dallas in 1999 before moving on. Troy Aikman's body had broken down. Too many concussions, too many hits. He retired in 2001. Michael Irvin's career ended on the turf in Philadelphia, a spinal injury that left him motionless while Eagles fans cheered. He never played again. And Emmitt? He stayed long enough to break the NFL's all-time rushing record in 2002 as a Dallas Cowboy. But the team was no longer a contender. The dynasty was long gone. Dallas released him the next season. Emmitt finished his career in an Arizona Cardinals jersey. Barry Switzer had already resigned after a 6-10 disaster in 1997. Then came the carousel. Gailey, Campo, Parcells, Phillips. The wins faded, the aura dimmed, but the story never stopped. Because legends don't need trophies, they need myth. 3 Super Bowl titles, 6 Hall of Fame players. Troy Aikman, Emmitt Smith, Michael Irvin, Charles Haley, Larry Allen, Deion Sanders. 2 Hall of Fame architects, Jimmy Johnson and Jerry Jones.
How about them Cowboys?
But what made them great also destroyed them. They weren't built for longevity. They were built for spectacle, for chaos, for dominance at any cost. They didn't walk the line between brilliance and disaster. They erased it and laughed while the fire spread. They were brilliant. They were broken. They were America's team, and they loved every minute of being hated. This is not a football story. It's a story of power, chaos, and American obsession. This is the team America loves to hate.